I must be getting old. These weeks go so fast, don't they? Anyway, I hope you've all had a good week. And as you know, the weekend starts here. If you're watching in England, where did you hear that? About 100 years ago. Hello and welcome to this week's show. Post your thoughts and comments, as always, during the live show below the live stream, and my guests will respond to them in the next hour. Maybe a bit longer. We'll see how it goes. And please continue doing what you've been doing, and I appreciate it. Click the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening to this show, whether it's live, recorded, audio only, whatever, so you can be notified of a new, fresh edition of this show every Friday. Greg Bassenian grew up in Laguna Beach, California. He earned his Master of Fine Arts degree in screenwriting at the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts, and Greg received his Bachelor of Arts in Film Production from Boston University. Greg's CV includes his work on television shows, including The King of Queens and America's Next Top Model, and writing and producing several episodes of the hugely successful CSI Miami series. Greg is the founder and executive producer at Aris, an award-winning film and commercial production and post-production studio in Los Angeles. The Aris team have produced advertising, film, and branded content for clients who include American Express, Home Depot, Coca-Cola, PBS, and 21st Century Fox. Greg has written and directed the award-winning documentary Miracle in the Desert, The Rise and Fall of the Salton Sea. He is in our virtual green room, and before I bring him onto the show, let's watch the trailer for his new film. Let me just stop and say hi, Nick. Welcome. You've got a good show to watch today. So anyway, as I said, my guest is in our virtual green room, and I am going to show you the trailer before I bring him onto the show. But just before I roll the tape, having watched this film, I've watched it a couple of times, and I've been very moved by it. And because of that, I would like to dedicate today's show to the memory of Marie Dugan, who died in 2009 at the age of 16. Her sister Michelle is featured in the film and tells Marie's story, which is directly related to the film's narrative. But now let's go and roll the tape for the trailer of my guest's new documentary, one that you should not miss.
People don't know where we are.
This is going to affect everything from Mexico to Los Angeles.
The Salton Sea is a very mysterious place.
The Salton Sea is the largest lake in the state of California.
People fly over the area and they see this large body of water and they don't even know what it is.
As a boy, we used to fish there.
Well, by the 1960s, it was a popular location.
Hundreds of thousands of people had visited more than Yosemite National Park.
And they brought in all these stars.
Marilyn Monroe, the Beach Boys.
There was no thought about what would slowly be happening to the sea.
Then things just stopped.
People lost money. It was a real estate scandal.
California is idly standing by and allocating very few resources to a massive environmental disaster.
As the shorelines retreat to new lows, more dust in the air, that can create a public health hazard.
Millions of people are within air quality range of this basin.
It shreds your lung cells.
I'm 27 years old. They have said my lungs have taken so much damage, you might want to start thinking about a lung transplant.
The cost of inaction at the Salton Sea is between $29 and $70 billion.
Whether the state of California is going to pay for solving that problem, or the people of the Imperial and Coachella and Mexicali valleys are going to pay those costs. Somebody's going to pay.
I am pleased to welcome Greg Bassenian to this program for the first time. Hello there, Greg.
Hi, Phil. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for the film. It's an important film, and it's a beautifully made one. And before we begin, I told you off camera that I felt this film is your love letter to the Salton Sea. But before we get to that, and talking about love letters, I want to extend a belated congratulations to you and Karen on your marriage, which was just, and just in case you forget, it's 4 months ago next Wednesday. Okay, so there's some kind of gift you buy for that. I don't know what it is.
Yes.
But how did you manage? How did you manage a wedding mid-lockdown?
It was challenging. It was very challenging. What happened was we were supposed to do a big traditional thing, and unfortunately that just wasn't possible. And I think a lot of people that's been happening. So what we did was we had a small ceremony with family and friends, and we did it in her sister's backyard. So it was actually very nice. It was small, intimate, and then hopefully we're gonna do the big one with everybody and all of our friends next year. So it was kind of a small, intimate thing, but it was wonderful.
Oh, I'm sure I saw where you had it and everything. I'm such a nosy bugger, and I got to ask you this because I am I know that you can't be a vegetarian because I know you like oysters. So I'm assuming you can't like oysters. By the way, does she like oysters? I never did get the answer to that. I know you asked her. Does she like oysters?
Yes.
Oh, good. I've got to ask you about you both come from an Armenian stock heritage.
Yes.
And I know that your marriage came about similarly to me through a blind date, but yours came about while you were having dinner at a place called Carousel Restaurant, very famous Armenian restaurant in California. I just want to know this because I am addicted to this food. Did you happen to eat the lamb kebab there?
It's very good. I mean, it's very good.
You've had it there?
Yes, I have. It's actually the best I've had. I mean, it's really unbelievable.
That's the end of the show. I hate you because I was reading about how they must marinate it for a couple of days, and then once I saw that menu, I knew I had to ask you. Oh, next time you go in there, send me a piece, would you?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I don't know if it'll hold, but I'll do my best.
Hey, next time I come out to your neck of the woods, we got to go for dinner there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now I'm so hungry. I don't want to do the rest of the show. So anyway, moving on from that, your parents used to take you on holidays not far from the Salton Sea.
Sure.
Yet you, like so many other people, both locally and around the country, were unfamiliar with the story of this lake, a former celebrity playground which covers 350 square miles. The issue that we're going to be talking about and which you cover so well and so important in your film, was it pushed under the rug to avoid discovery and humiliation by the local government?
That is a tough question to answer, but I'm going to do my best. So I think what's been happening and what we try to cover is the situation there is very, very complex. And I'll try to speak about it without giving too much away. So, if people watch the film, I'm not spoiling anything for them. But I think what's been happening is people know there's an issue. People know that it's going to turn into a larger issue, but there is a pushing off of responsibilities between various people behind the scenes. So you have the state of California, they don't want to be responsible for what could be an ecological disaster necessarily. And they've got their own problems. We all got problems to deal with now, especially with COVID and all these things.
Of course, yeah.
Then there's the local water agency. In the local water agency, there are land rights and real estate rights and all sorts of things where they own land that is potentially dangerous when it starts having dust issues. So there's a lot of back and forth. And I think that to a certain extent, they're not necessarily sweeping it under the rug, but they're kind of just sitting on it. You know, they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and nothing's going to happen until it's a little bit too late, until things get a bit extreme. And then hopefully we might see some critical action, but it's been kind of long overdue, and there hasn't been any major action taken. There's been some things that have been, there's money that's been given and projects that have been started, but they don't seem to have the impact that people in the area are looking for.
And there's something about this film which I know has to have occurred to you. It must have occurred to you many times, that you just said something where you said, they're just waiting and waiting. And I know of another disease that people around the world heard about and waited on, and now look what's happened. So this, I think we should have learned our lesson. As we go along, we'll fill the audience in on what the film is about, and we'll do that slowly. So out of curiosity, you visited Salton Sea. Yes. And you were moved by what you saw, the skeleton of a once vibrant community. You decided to shoot what is known in the industry as a short sizzle reel to pitch, in this case, not to a studio, but I believe to pitch to potential investors. Sure. In what you intended to make as a short documentary.
Right. And
you felt compelled to make something about what you saw. But you ran into some technical issues with your camera. You should have called me. And yes. while checking out the camera, Destiny stepped in. I want you to tell the audience what happened in the parking lot while you were trying to get your camera sorted out.
Yes. So glad you asked. What happened was, and I'll give a little preface, I was a first-time filmmaker. I didn't have any material to show anybody who I wanted to interview. So that's a challenge as a first timer, is people are going to ask you, well, what is this film and what films have you done before? And let me see some work that you've had, right? Pretty typical. I didn't have any work. So I decided to rent a camera, go to Palm Springs, shoot some footage, cut it together so that when I approached people, I could show them something. So I wasn't all smoke and mirrors. As I'm in the middle of this day, my camera breaks down. I went to a parking lot. I didn't even know what the parking lot was. And I take the camera out. I'm working on it behind my car. It's a Sunday, so there's not really anybody there. I'm thinking I'm safe. Nobody's going to bother me. It was a big camera. It was a 40-pound camera at that point. And this guy approaches me from behind, and I immediately kind of get defensive, because when you're filming in the street, a lot of people, they shut you down, or they say you can't film here and all that type of thing. So I immediately just started packing up my camera. And he said, "Oh, don't worry. What are you shooting? I'm not going to bust you." And I said, okay." He said, "I'm a reporter at the Desert Sun, which is the newspaper in Palm Springs." He said, "You're in our parking lot. The Desert Sun building is right here."
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
He said, "You're in our parking lot." So I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "I'm making a documentary about the Salton Sea." And immediately he kind of lit up a little bit, right? He knew. And he said, "Oh, really?" He said, "Well, I saw your camera. I knew you must know what you're doing, because it was like a big camera." And he said, "I need to put you in touch with our environment reporter here at the Desert Sun. He's been covering the Salton Sea for 20 years. You should talk to him." And that kind of was that was a snowballing effect for me, because immediately he put me in touch with that reporter, Ian James, who's in the film. And Ian was a wonderful interview subject, wonderful expert on the subject, and then ended up patching me into a lot of other people who I ended up interviewing for the film. So it's kind of
kismet,
if you will.
It was like kismet. It was just meant to be. But I mean, boy, was he wrong thinking you knew about the camera. You just rented the damn thing. Here's what I'd like to do. There's a person who appears a lot in the film, very charismatic, and you were very lucky. We're talking this shortly about the people that you have in this film, but I would like to play the clip, and I thank you for sharing your clips with me. This is the Kerry clip, and I think this is a good way to start the beginning of talking about this area. So let's play a clip from the movie with Kerry.
So welcome to Desert Shores, California. This is the northernmost town in the west shores of the Salton Sea. It's some of the nicer homes and the most homes on a waterfront property.
I moved out to the Salton Sea around 2014. We founded the Eco Media Compass, a voice for the Salton Sea in the political realm. We became a go-to for knowledge, information, and ideas on how to restore the Salton Sea. In many cases, the residents weren't able to make it to Sacramento, and we have been able to organize their voices in a way that could be heard, unlike before. Ultimately, I became the mayor of the West Shores, so Salton City, Vista Del Mar, Salton Sea Beach, and Desert Shores for 2 terms. 25 years ago, my mom passed away from a lung disease. She wasn't living at the Salton Sea, but I was able to see firsthand what people go through and how hard they suffer if their lungs and their breathing are compromised. And one of the main reasons that I came out here and did this work is because I don't want to see other people have to go through that.
What I would like to do, Greg, and I'm going to save you the task of doing it because I know you've given a lot of interviews, written and audio. So I'm just going to give a brief synopsis to everyone to save you that, and you can pick up from there. And I want to tell everyone who's joined us, and thank you all for joining us. Please make yourself known to me. Hi, Lloyd. My friend Lloyd Beanie is somebody that you should know. He is the head of World Entertainment News Network. So if he likes what we have to say, it can be in tomorrow's newspapers. I'm genuinely. Lloyd just wants to know where to see the movie. I'm not telling you now, Lloyd, because that comes at the end of the show. So either watch the end of the show, or if you don't, I'll email you where you can watch it, or go to YouTube and you can watch it on there. So sit tight, mate. Okay, hope you will. I also wanted to mention to those of you who have just joined us, quite a few of you, only people who are watching the live show, not the video version, that we will play the trailer of this documentary at the very end of the film. So at the very end of the show. In 1905, the California Development Company built irrigation canals to the South Californian desert in a bid to create farmland. I've stolen a lot of this from you, Greg. So, and I've kind of, changed the language a bit, so it doesn't sound like it comes from you. But I've borrowed a bit here and there. But I just thought I'd save you the effort. Okay. The canals eventually got clogged. And in an attempt to get, that's not supposed to happen, in an attempt to get the water flowing again, a series of cuts were made in the bank of the Colorado River to create a path to the canals. This turned out, ladies and gentlemen, to be a very big mistake. When the Colorado River flooded, it's not funny, I don't know why I'm laughing. When it flooded, and it sounds like a Keystone Cops episode, frankly. When the Colorado River flooded, it overtook the canals, and the entire 1,450 miles diverted into the desert. This went on for 2 years while repairs took place, filling what was once a dry lake bed and creating the Salton Sea. What was once a sporting and nightlife playground for the Hollywood stars of the 50s and 60s. We're talking now about the Salton Sea after the flooding. It was a happening place. I know in the film you say Sinatra was there, the Beach Boys, everyone was there. But this playground quickly deteriorated into a wasteland. How did that happen, Greg?
Again...
Wait a minute, I've just got to ask you, have you seen the film? Because I don't want to ask you any questions you might not know anything about.
So I'll try to explain again without spoiling too much of the movie, but I'll explain in a simple way as I can. First of all, you did an excellent job of summing that up. Very excellent job.
Thank you. Thank you.
So to give it context for those who are watching, in the 60s, the Salton Sea, after that whole area had flooded, it's a huge lake. It's very, very large. It's the largest lake in the state of California. Okay, it's bigger than Lake Tahoe. It's bigger than all these places. It's 350 square miles. In the 60s, it got developed and it was beautiful, and there was water skiing and fish and all these things. But in the 70s and 80s, there was a series of events that sort of occurred that caused a decline in the people in the area, right? So one of the biggest challenges with the physical sea itself is that the shoreline, it is a very unstable shoreline. It will rise, it will fall. And so over the years, people who had built their houses along the edge of the sea, that would flood out and they would lose their property and they would take off, right? So when you build something along the water and then it floods and gets destroyed, you kind of leave. You go, well, I can't live here anymore. It's unstable. So the people started leaving in the 70s and the 80s because the sea would flood out their homes and they lost their money and they sort of took off. And the developments that had been built, people didn't stay there. It became kind of a, it was kind of a dilapidated area, so to speak, even though it's a very beautiful place. And the bigger issue now is that the water that used to come into the sea from that Colorado River that you described so eloquently, right? That water is no longer coming into the sea to keep it level, okay? That water is going to Los Angeles and San Diego for people to drink. Very, very logical, right? Well, you got to send the water where the people are. So that Salton Sea began shrinking very, very quickly. It sort of peaked in the 80s in terms of its size. It peaked in the 80s, and it's been in a rapid decline ever since, and a very rapid decline starting in 2018 due to some agreements. I won't get into the minute details of the agreements and things, but it's in a rapid decline. It's shrinking very, very quickly now, and that's a big problem.
Yeah. The Imperial, and I don't want to ask you anything that will put you in a position where if you go back or you're talking to people about showing this film, I don't want to put you into any position where fingers are being pointed. So I'm just going to say things from my perspective from seeing the film. But it seems that the Imperial Irrigation District is directly responsible or should have some responsibility for not dealing with this situation, given some of the stuff that you were just saying you don't want to get into. I'll let you respond to that after I roll another piece of tape here, which I think is very relevant. And I love the way my guests just segue me always into the tape that I have. So let's roll the tape now. I'll be back in about 70 seconds.
In 1912, the Imperial Irrigation District bought the California Development Company out of bankruptcy. They began to control the water distribution throughout the Imperial Valley, and still do to this day.
Much of the Imperial Valley receives power and water from the Imperial Irrigation District, or IID. So the IID is the largest controller of water of the end of the Colorado River, and they support many, many farms that are in the region. For some time, it was growing close to half of the nation's winter vegetables in this region.
The Salton Sea is sustained almost entirely by runoff from the farms and fields of the Imperial Valley. The hydrology of the Colorado River simply won't sustain a sea the size that it is today.
In 2003, everyone knew we weren't going to have enough water to continue using it the way that we have been for many years. So we needed to find ways to be more resourceful and cut back on our water uses.
The biggest user of Colorado River water, not just in the state of California, but on the system as a whole, is the Imperial Irrigation District. So in 2003, they signed an agreement called the Quantification Settlement Agreement, which was a way to bring California down to its normal year entitlement of Colorado River water.
When you watch that and you watch this and you see your film, and we're going to talk about the way you shot this film in a while, and the beautiful way you shot it, and it just seems a tragedy that everything seems to come down to political organizations or political groups or politics, or, in this day and age with what we're all going through, domestically here and around the world with one thing and another. I watched your film. I just want to interrupt again. My friend Lloyd, besides being a big shot in his own bathroom, Lloyd is my old schoolmate, and his son Owen was one of California's, if not the top paparazzi in California. And he said that his name is Owen Beanie. He said that he's been there and he's been driving Lloyd mad to go there. Lloyd, I'll put you in touch with Greg. Maybe you'll go with Greg, and Greg will take you to this wonderful Armenian restaurant, and you'll pick up the tab and tell me, right? It's a good deal. You take Lloyd to this area, and Lloyd will buy you lunch. He'll put it on his Californian account. Anyway, let's get back to this. excuse me, I watched your film, and I don't know if anger was one of the responses that you were wanting the audience to get. Hello, Anne. But that was now I'm getting angry because of what we're going to discover as we go along in our chat. I'm angry. This is why I said it might be sensitive for you to respond to this. Are you angry?
I'm disappointed. I wouldn't say angry. I think to answer your question from before about the Imperial Irrigation District.
And that's who I'm talking about, by the way. That's who I'm talking about.
I have said this before, so it's not you can ask me that question. This is not a situation where there's a smoking gun and there's one person responsible and this person is guilty and they've been hiding, what they've been doing. That, from my perspective, that is not the issue here. So it's not just on one agency or one person. It's the responsibility of many people to take definitive action, because there's many people who are responsible for safeguarding it as a natural resource for the wildlife that's there and used to live there, right?
Used to be
but also to safeguard the people in the area who stand to suffer detrimental health effects from what will be happening not too long from now. And, so it's not just this person did this or this person did that. It's kind of what you're saying, which is it's a very complex political situation. There's a lot of different people involved in it. And I'm disappointed because you want somebody to step up and take definitive action. You want somebody to say, okay, we're going to handle this. We're not going to shed the responsibility, and we're going to see some meaningful progress. The problem is that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Carrie, who you showed the clip of, wonderful guy. And I hope he's watching. And Eco Media Compass is a wonderful organization. If people want to know about the scene, what's going on there, they should, really follow Carrie and Eco Media Compass. They're the ones that have kind of stepped up, a local grassroots organization to raise awareness. And actually, they're the only ones doing tangible projects, at the sea. There are some state-funded projects that have stalled. So the state has done some stuff and IID has done some stuff, but it doesn't seem to get completed. And
but there's that word again. I'm sick of hearing it. Always in government, things stall or they just get put over here in a stack. Let me just move on to another point, because this is very complex. Complex in the sense that there are so many aspects to this story that come into play here. And I just want to share this with the audience so they, as I said at the beginning, they get a sense of what we're talking about. We're not giving away the film because you have to watch the film to hear it from everyone who lives there and to really get into what's going on. But the salinity of the lake is so high that most of the fish in the lake have died. Right. It used to be a huge fishery with tens of millions of fish. And then because the fish have gone, the birds that used to come and feed on the fish have also left. So that ecosystem has diminished by about 90%. And for those of us who, and I'm not sending people to watch somebody else's documentary, but so many of us who watch David Attenborough's wonderful documentaries know that one natural disaster has a domino effect on the bird and animal life that depends on the region, and that moves on to so much more. And I just want to bring this up as well. And I'm saving you doing all this because then we can chat about it.
Sure.
As the shoreline pulls back, and keeping in mind that there's all this salt and everything going on, as the shoreline pulls back, there's roughly 115 years. I said, what was it? 1902. So it's more than that.
Yeah,
of silt, which is exposed to the wind. Tiny particles in a wide open, and when you watch the film, you'll see a very wide open, extremely windy area, specifically PM 2.5 and PM 10, which present high rates of asthma. The PM number, and I'm just not sharing this with you, Greg, but with the audience, the PM number refers to a dangerous particles with a diameter of 10 microns or less. So these are 2.5 or 10. So these are big enough to be ingested. It's the stuff, frankly, this scenario is the stuff of the most grotesque nightmares. And Greg documents some nightmares in the film. How long did it take you to find out about this danger zone aspect of the area?
It's a good question, because when I started making the film, it was not about that necessarily. When I started, it was about the history and I started the film to answer the question, why did people leave, right? And so as I sort of dominoed into that, I found out about it when I talked to Ian, who was working at the Desert Sun at the time. And he started to alert me to a lot of the impacts and health impacts and the receding shoreline and all these things. So as you, again, very eloquently summed up, particulate matter 2.5, which is extraordinarily small, it will be absorbed into your bloodstream directly from your lungs, right? So it's very, very bad. It's just bad. There's no eloquent way to say it. It's terrible for breathing. And the people in that area are already at very high risk. And, that stuff travels extremely far. We had a news story, I don't know, 4 months ago about how dust from Africa and the Sahara had blown to the United States and was covering the southern United States. So that's thousands and thousands of miles.
Yeah.
The Salton Sea is 150 miles from Los Angeles. So they don't know the true impact of what will happen, but, it doesn't take much to imagine what will happen. And this already happened at Owens Lake, which we cover in the film. So it's history repeating itself, except this lake is much, much larger than Owens Lake. Owens Lake is still large. This is 5 times larger.
Oh yeah.
So
This is, I mean, what did we say? 300 odd square miles, which is
350, 360 square miles or so.
Yeah. What's the square mileage of Manhattan? I'm not sure, but it's
about 15 Manhattans, but I think 13 to 15 Manhattans you could fit inside the Salton Sea.
That's
it's very
serious.
large.
That's very serious. But Greg, this is where I'm starting to get a bit confused. And I get confused very easily.
Sure.
The California Air Resources Board, abbreviation is CARB, C-A-R-B, is in general concerned about airborne particles because of their effects on the health of Californians and the environment. Both PM2.5 and PM10, when inhaled, are deposited on the lungs and induce, as you've already said, serious tissue damage and lung inflammation. Why aren't CARB treating this as a major emergency? I mean, it didn't just begin since COVID, so they can't say, well, we're busy with that. It's been around for a while. So that's my first question. And I wonder if you have an answer to that, because this is now where I start to get a bit agitated.
So recently, at the end of last year, Imperial County did declare a state of emergency in regards to the air. Okay. So not CARB, but Imperial County themselves said, we have a serious air quality issue, right? So that was a step in the right direction. I had finished the film at that point. So unfortunately, it's not included in the film, but that was raised by the county. But in terms of the, natural resources boards and CARB and things like that, the reason I think they haven't raised it is because up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the shoreline had not shrunk quite enough for these large exposed areas to trigger these warnings or these sort of this dust. I think up until about 2015, when I started making the film, there was still enough water to cover up the area to a certain extent and mitigate some of those things. But in the southern portion of the sea, you're seeing hundreds and hundreds, thousands of acres being exposed now. So I think ultimately it's getting worse. They're probably, on top of it, but they've got a lot of other problems going on right now. So it gets kind of, to your point, gets swept under the rug a little bit. And they say, well, not that many people are there. So why are we fussing about this? It's Imperial County. We don't, there's only, X amount of people down there. We've got bigger fish to fry up in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And I think it just gets pushed aside, unfortunately. Those populations So in Imperial County, especially large Latin or Latinx population there, they don't have the representation and the voice that you would want them to have. And so part of the film is allowing that to come out and to raise awareness for what's going on.
Well, something else I was going to touch on, I might as well touch on it now and mention, excuse me, excuse me, I'm sorry.
No problem.
And in Spain, and she notes here that the Sahara sand often lands in my pool. It's awful, which gets me onto another point here. This is, if memory serves from the film, this is about 15 miles. It's by the Coachella Valley. It's 15 miles from where the Coachella, the famous annual, obviously not this year, but the Coachella Festival is held. Which brings in thousands and thousands of people,
right.
And it's only 150 odd miles from Los Angeles, right. and we know that winds can carry things quite a distance. So with that in mind, I'm wondering whether the people of Los Angeles, the people who attend Coachella, are warned about this, and also, because of the potential that this has down the road, whether FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has in any way been brought into the picture.
I'm not aware if FEMA has been involved or has been briefed. I know that the state legislature is aware, and there is a 10-year plan, and we cover that in the film, but the 10-year plan is far behind and far off schedule. As far as the dust, LA, a few, 4 or 5 years ago, actually, it wasn't sand that got blown from the Salton Sea. The Salton Sea has a reputation of having a odor, for various reasons. And actually, the odor was so strong, it blew into Los Angeles, and there were people complaining about that. So, you think about that. If that can blow to LA, my thought is, again, I don't know about the particulate per se. I'm not a scientist, I'm a filmmaker, but I would suspect, that very, very small particulate, specifically PM 2.5, which is basically like a baking powder.
Yeah.
Like flour. It's like flour, right?
Yeah.
Can surely blow this way. And we've already had issues with fires. I mean, Los Angeles has been in smoke for 2 months, So it's already an issue with the fires. And to me, it's frightening because you look at the environment in general and what's happening. I won't comment on people's beliefs on if it's man-made or natural, but things are happening, whether we like it or not. And so it's just another thing that's unfortunately could contribute to a degrading environment that we have to sort of live in and also be mindful of.
And I would imagine that some of the smell is the millions of decaying fish that are on the beaches. And
so there's two things that go on there. One, it used to be the fish. There's no more fish left. So all the fish that were on the shoreline are decayed fully at this point. I went out there recently. And there's no more fish left to die. So that you're not seeing die-offs anymore because there's nothing to die, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a very macabre thing to say, but there's no more die-offs because there's nothing to die.
Everything's dead.
Everything's dead. And then some of the smell is natural. There's I believe it's is it hydrogen sulfide? The lake itself just has some natural processes, and when it gets windy, some gases come up from underneath. It's not harmful. That's not going to hurt you. It makes you feel a little weird, and it smells funny, but it's a natural process from just 100 years of decaying stuff at the bottom of a lake, So it's mostly natural, and people think it's poisonous and this, that, and the other, and it's just not. So it's unfortunate, the sort of press.
I had a moment of whimsical thought just now that I was going to share with you, but it's so distasteful that I don't think I will. I'll save that till afterwards.
Yeah. You can share it privately.
I'll share it privately because it will bring down the tone of this show. But I mentioned Michelle Dugan at the beginning of today's show, and her sister who died at the age of 16, which was terrible, and it's and she tells that in the film, and it is definitely a Kleenex moment and a powerful moment. I just want to roll some tape of Michelle. who lost her sister, and who herself is suffering cruelly from what's going on, physically cruelly, from what's going on in the region. So this is Michelle Dugan, and a brief look at her story.
My sister and I were a year and a half apart. We felt like we were twins. We dressed up the same. We did everything together. You know, she was my best friend. I was her best friend. So we always found a way to like stick together. Asthma, it was always there. I always had to carry an inhaler with me. So for me, it was normal. My sister Marie was diagnosed at 12 years old. For Marie, it was still very new. So she didn't get as many asthma attacks as I did. But I still didn't let it affect my life. We were at a birthday party and all of a sudden I stopped breathing. I had a lot of pain and I remember my mom was like, this is not normal. Let's take you to the emergency room. They took me to Eisenhower and there they told you know what? She has a very, very severe pneumonia. She's gonna have to stay here. I was there for over a month. We went to the doctor. He's like, you know what, you might want to start thinking about getting a lung transplant. And that was when I was 12. That was the first time I ever heard of a lung transplant.
It's tragic. And it's going to be more or less a disaster in the not too distant future. For selfish money. Money. It's all about money.
Isn't that true? But
yes.
But then, if we think we've got enough of the story here, there's an entirely different situation, or an additional situation: the selenium scare.
Oh yes.
Selenium is. Let me just see. Joe Moore said something. Hello, Joe. I know you're there. I haven't said hello to you. I'm surprised that such an environmental issue wouldn't have a larger group looking to solve the issues. I would definitely have to watch this important documentary. Thank you, Joe. Yes, and tell your friends about it. This is more serious than just this hour or so conversation is enlightening you on. So let's talk about the selenium scare. Selenium is a naturally occurring substance, but if it accumulates in high levels, it can be dangerous. And after experts measured selenium levels in the fish, it was determined there was a high level of selenium. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into an area which it tends to occur in politics a lot. I don't discuss politics, but there's a lot of like political stuff that seems to be leering at me from your film, and all these little controversies that perhaps may or may not be true, but they percolate to the surface. Selenium itself is used in fertilizers, lithium, selenium batteries, glass production, and so many other products. So I then come away with a question, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm sure this is what everyone alludes to. Could it be that business and less scrupulous political leaders are planning to explore the potential to make money from the selenium that's there?
So that was discussed, and I'm happy to discuss that. It's not necessarily in the film that much. I don't cover the lithium resources that may be there, but there was talk about vested business interests who potentially might want to, specifically the lithium. Apparently Tesla has gone out there to, it was reported recently, to look to see if there's lithium at the Salton Sea for batteries, because it's a very valuable mineral now that electric cars are going to be taking over, it seems. And so they've explored that. I don't know how much has come of it, and I say that because I've been going out there for more than half a decade at this point, and I can't say that I've seen much business development. You know what I mean? There's talk about it, and there's a lot of talk about the Salton Sea, but like all things at the Salton Sea, there's a lot of talk and not much happens. But I think that there is interest. I don't know from a scientific or for a business standpoint if the amount of lithium that needs to be there is actually there. I think they would have to do some exploration and determine if it's worth developing, the area.
Sure,
absolutely, and that whole thing. But it's possible. Obviously, there's going to be theories, and as you were saying, when all of this political stuff gets involved, people start to wonder what's actually going on behind the scenes. I didn't explore it that much because people simply, I can tell you honestly, when I was interviewing people, it just didn't come up that much. It didn't organically come up.
Yeah, but you would have needed to go into everything that I'm touching on, just grazing the surface of with you. You would have needed a 5-part, 6-part, which wouldn't have been bad, Netflix documentary to cover everything. Which this film could be the sizzle to Netflix for a series for you, by the way.
Well, the whole thing is, even the first 15 minutes, which is the history of how the sea got formed, that in and of itself is a whole saga that we're scratching the surface there.
I know.
So, feature film length, we compressed it and we want to make it
well, it's palatable. It's palatable. It's entertaining. It's not, it sounds like a very dry subject. I mean, that's literally a terrible pun. Terrible pun. But I want to mention, and I want to address what Joe Moore, a friend of mine, a friend from social media and from the show and from elsewhere, I want to just address what he asked. The region has one representative in the state legislature, and little power to stop what's going on. Congressman Raul Ruiz is also a physician, which is interesting, born and raised in the region. And besides representing the 36th district, which this covers, his main area of coverage is San Diego, which is, considerably more important, I guess, on the agenda than the Salton Sea. Also, as you've already said, Greg, the Salton Sea has a large Latino population, a large farming population, who are being ignored, and highly vulnerable people to getting sick from this. And I've already mentioned the 16-year-old who I believe died from this. This is an appalling and disgraceful oversight by local politics. And I'd like to play another clip. I'm not giving away all the film. I'm just playing 60-second clips here. But these are like little, what the chef sends out before the meal, just a little appetizers so that you'll go for the main entree. But carrying on from what I'm just talking about, let's take the video. Leah, we're gonna roll the tape on what I'm calling action not being taken. Let's roll it now.
There was a study that was done by the Pacific Institute, and they looked at what they called the costs of inaction, basically the social and economic costs of doing nothing, of the status quo at the Salton Sea.
I started to dive into this a little deeper and said, well, what's actually the actual cost of not taking action at the Salton Sea? And I started looking at some previous studies and estimating some of these costs.
That organization came up with an estimate of between $29 and $70 billion over the next 30 years.
So the trade-off is not $9 billion for doing something versus zero. The trade-off was $9 billion for doing something versus 29 or as much as $70 billion for not taking action at the Salton Sea. And the problem is that people that would pay those costs at the state level were not the people that would bear those costs in the Salton Sea region. If the Salton Sea were right next to LA or right next to San Francisco or Sacramento, we would have solved this problem a long time ago.
We're not supported by congressmen or state senators. Our congressman represents San Diego. How is he going to help us when the people in San Diego are thirsty?
We live in the area. It's our lives that are at stake. The people that make all these decisions do not live in the area, so they aren't vested.
2 years ago, I had the chance to stop by every state senator and assemblyperson's office in one day in Sacramento. And about a third of their staff didn't know the largest lake in the state existed. This area has a large Hispanic demographic, and there's been some challenges in bridging the gap between the governmental meetings that are mostly held in English and many of the people that live here that just aren't being represented.
It makes me feel angry. For us to go through Marie's death, that was a lot of pain. We went through a lot of pain. And then even after, several kids passed away. And I kept thinking, like, why? Why isn't anybody doing anything? Why isn't anybody seeing that we're real people with real feelings and we're going through a lot of pain?
So, Greg, one of the notes that I wrote to myself, I watch the work of a guest the day before they come on the show, and I write notes that just hit me while watching it. And I thought, let's get everything into perspective here. We've got California wildfires, a global epidemic, and the Salton Sea disaster growing by the day. And I put a little question to myself: Is this a matter of local government not being able to chew gum and walk at the same time? I'm not. I really and truly, just the more I watch these snippets from the film, the more angry I get. I'm not angry. That is the wrong word. Your film has frustrated me because we're seeing so many deaths around the world from COVID, and we're seeing something here that is going to become. I don't care. I mean, we've already had deaths from it, and there are too many deaths alone. Something should be done about this. So I don't know. I made that comment. I don't know if you think that's too whimsical or if it's a fact.
No, I think the challenge is, again, resources and how those resources are being dispersed and used in the region. And the state, if you ask the state, they'll say, we've given money for restoration and all these things. 2018, the 10-year plan, as it's called. But again, that money has not really reached the area in the amounts needed for any tangible action to have happened. I can tell you personally that when I was there, 2016, they started doing something at the south end of the sea. I saw, trucks and tubes and something or other. And I thought, oh, okay, finally they're going to do something here. And I actually thought, oh, the film's not going to be relevant. They're going to fix this before I finish the film.
So you stopped it happening. You stopped the progress happening. Go on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the film would work, right. And it was disappointing again, because I would go back to that same spot every year. I would drive down to that area, hoping to see what they're trying to basically do is flood it with a little bit of water. So when there's wind, it doesn't kick up dust. And the tubes would be there. There would be some holes in the ground, and that was it. And they just, nothing has happened. And as I think the last time I was there was early 2019 late 2019. And it was still that way, still tubes, still holes in the dirt. They had not flooded anything with water. So, it's a lot of people saying, yes, we're aware of it and we're doing something. But when you actually go visit it and you see what's going on, it just doesn't quite finish. You never get to the finish line. We profiled that project in the film where they're trying to refill these canals. And that was in 2018.
Yeah.
And that's not done. This is just not even, they're still trying to figure out who to pay for it, So it's unbelievable how long this stuff takes.
So as I see it, the solution to what is a potential health crisis and the solution to this entire problem is to simply get water back into the lake and maintain the water level, and everything will, I hate to use this expression because I've heard it used by somebody else, but I will say everything else will magically go away. I mean, but this is the case. So basically we have got to get, the people that care, have got to get a lot of water into this lake and keep it filled, and use modern technology to make sure it doesn't evaporate, and then get the salt levels down. I don't know how they do that. Get David Attenborough out there, plop a lot of fish in the water. I mean, this place can become a thriving community again, correct?
Yeah,
you think?
It's still a beautiful community. I think it gets some press, and it admittedly looks not so beautiful in some parts of the film. But when you go out there and you meet the people that live there now, and you see the landscape, it's still very beautiful, and the communities are still very nice. It's just unfortunate that it's progressed to a point where the water has gone down and you see this red water. But to answer your question, yes, there needs to be water, and there needs to be a sizable amount of it. And we're not going to get more fresh water from the Colorado River. That's done. That's going to San Diego and Los Angeles. So what they've floated and what's in the film is potentially building a canal from Gulf of Sea of Cortez, which is down near Mexico, 20 to 30 miles up into the Salton Sea. And that's been brought up to the local representatives in the area as well, so they're aware of that too. The challenge is they don't want to. Last I heard, which was very recently, in May or June, the California officials don't want to negotiate or engage in negotiations with the Mexican government to do something like that. So they're aware of that concept. They're aware of potentially building that canal, but they always say, oh, this is ridiculous. It's such a big undertaking. It's billions of dollars, to which the local organizations say, well, you're going to pay billions in health costs, even more if you don't do anything about it. So the solution would be to build a canal from the Sea of Cortez into the Salton Sea, and you would do some desalinization. So it kind of solves both problems, because look, we're going to need water. We're going to need water regardless, right? Southern California needs more water, whether it's coming from the Colorado River or the ocean.
Absolutely.
Everybody needs more water. So if you pump water from the Sea of Cortez, you have the possibility of desalinizing some of it as it's coming in, and then you can put some of it into the Salton Sea, and you can stabilize the shoreline and kind of solve that problem. So that's one of the solutions. There's hundreds of them. People have many different ones, and there's thoughts of splitting it into two different lakes and then managing two different lakes, and then there's thoughts of planting shrubbery, and there's all sorts of things that.
But you know what, Greg? About 4 years ago, there was an election, and I remember hearing that there was going to be a wall built around by Mexico, yes. And they were going to pay for the wall. Well, they didn't end up paying for the wall. I don't think it was built. So why don't they just use that wall money and put it in, into the water? Right. But what I have to tell you, and Joe he said, geez, he just saw pictures online. It looks like a desert.
Yes, yeah.
Joe, you're not supposed to be online looking at pictures. You're supposed to be watching this bloody conversation. You can do that later on in your own time. When I watched your film, I have to share this with you. I don't have to, but I want to share this with you. I don't know why, but I'm a bit weird when it comes to watching things, and I get flashes across my head. When I watched your film and saw the flashbacks to the area as it was, and how it has become, we spoke earlier about the 60s and the 50s, how it was the Hollywood elite's playground. Yeah. I was immediately struck, and I don't know if you've ever seen this. You certainly aren't old enough to have seen the original version, but you may have watched it in reruns. I was immediately struck by the final scene of the very first Planet of the Apes film with Charlton Heston.
Right.
For people that may have seen it and may forget this, he rode into a wasteland. The last scene of the film, when you think it's all over, he rode into a wasteland on the planet on which he accidentally landed. And he discovered he wasn't on a distant planet, was actually back on Earth in the future. And in the final scene, he looked up in horror at the rusting remains of the Statue of Liberty in the middle of a dry wasteland. I remember he got off and he pounded and he went, "You bastard, you finally done it," or "You son of a bitch, you finally did." Obviously, it was alluding to, an atomic war. But for me, Craig, your film, so that's what this reminds me of. And for me, your film is more than a story of one region. It's a portent of where this country could be headed if it's mismanaged, or any country. It doesn't necessarily reflect only on the United States. In a small way, on a larger scale, or in fact, if we look at the planet and what's happening to our planet, this is a portent of what's going to happen on a global scale.
Right. It's a cautionary tale, and it's a microcosm of, again, like you're talking about, mismanagement, or what happens when something happens and you don't take care of it. You don't look after it properly, specifically the environment, or in this case, it's almost like the rise and fall of a small society, right? Where you saw a boom and a bust in a very short amount of time. And that can happen on larger scales. It's happened at larger scales to societies across the globe in the past, right? But this is more modern. We can relate to this one. We saw it happen. People were there. People experienced it. And there's people alive now who were there. So it is kind of there are many themes here that are applicable to a lot of, to us in our daily lives, and specifically to how we take care of our environment, not just for us. We've got to take care of it for us and humans, but for the billions of other, animals that live here with us. It's not just us. There's, at one point there was 1 million birds on the Salton Sea, living on the Salton Sea.
Exactly.
And they're part of a very complex ecosystem that we all live in, and we've got to have them, and they've got to have us. So
absolutely. I mean, this is a 75-minute odd film, and it's a very important film. It goes very quickly. Before I just touch on a few other technical things about the film, because we've covered the story, and I'm going to ask you to stick around a bit longer. Okay,
sure.
Is that okay with you, folks? We're going to run a bit
no
late
problem.
here.
No problem.
A few more questions,
Sure.
comments, questions, observations. How has this film changed your future filmmaking plans? Do you think you'll pursue investigative, environmental stories to document and then get a huge deal with PBS or Netflix to show them? Seriously, has this turned you on to making investigative, important films like this?
Yes, it has. And it was a long process. At certain points, I didn't even think the film would get finished, knock on wood, it did. And my hope is, that people see it and that they become aware of this, and it drives awareness for the Salton Sea and for Carrie and all those people, but also for the environment. I'm a huge David Attenborough fan, Sir David Attenborough. So please feel free to tell people to watch his stuff. He's amazing and incredible. But I'd like to do another one. I've now that this one is out, as surreal as that feels, that people are now watching it after so long making it. I would like to pursue it, and a deal with PBS or Netflix is, that's the dream. But you do it to do it. You don't do it for the fortune or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. I'm more. It's more important to do it so that people have awareness of what's going on. We're using up resources on the planet at a very, very fast rate. At a very fast rate, and we have to, as a whole, change our behaviors to a certain extent, or else these problems that we're facing are going to get worse and worse, regardless of if you think climate change is human induced or not. I'm not even talking about climate change. I'm talking about the pollution in the ocean. I'm talking about devastation of the rainforest and things like that. We have to become aware of that, and we have to live a more sustainable life on the planet as a whole.
Yeah. I truly think that David Attenborough and Greta Thunberg should receive a copy of this, and I don't know.
I would love for.
Well, I don't see that there's any reason why you can't get it to them. Honestly, I really think that this film is that important that they should see it. I do have something that I want to ask you, because this fascinates me. I know the film took you about 5 odd years to do. From soup to nuts, and this is the first full-length feature film made by your production company, and over a 5-year period, there must have been days when you needed to be motivated. So many people need to be motivated on long-term projects. And you know, I've told you off camera that my audience knows I'm very much into photography, and I know that street photographers wake up on a bad winter's morning and they say, I think I'll go back to bed, but they know they got to get out there and document what they want to document. What drove you to complete this film on lethargic days? What got you out of bed to carry on? I mean, I'm sure you didn't do it every single day for 5 years. I'm sure there was some downtime. No. But what kept driving you to get it finished?
Two very specific things. One was the sea. If you go there, there's something about it that is very odd. It's very spectacular. It's very mysterious. And so there was a desire to just find out what happened. And that never left me. And I think it happens to many people who go there. They go and it leaves an impression on them, right? And of course, once I learned the story about the health impacts and what's happening to the people in the area, exposing that story and raising awareness for that was a huge part of it. The second thing, which was more tangible, was 2 years into the process, having not much money left to continue, it was at the point where I said, do I give up on this? What I did was I cut together a trailer of the footage that I had. It was not a completed film. I cut a trailer out of what I had. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put this on Facebook and I'm going to put it out there and see if anybody's interested. If this is something is it something that I think is interesting, or is it something that a broader audience is going to think is interesting? Because there's a difference. And I put it on Facebook. I think I paid $50 to promote it.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, within 4 days, it had 300,000 views, and it was getting it was getting a share a minute at one point. So people, I mean, it was like a mini viral event, not millions and millions, but mini viral event.
Yeah.
And I was a little taken aback. I thought, gee, okay, well, people actually want to see the film and people want to watch it. And they started reaching out via Instagram and Facebook saying, where can I see it? Where can I find this? I want to know the story.
Good.
And when that happened, I did a Kickstarter. We raised some money, and that was really and then once you do a Kickstarter, you have people yelling at you to finish the film. So that was the final, that was the pressure to get it done. And I'm very happy that it happened. But ultimately, those people that watched it, when people watch it and they respond, you say, oh, this is something that people want to see. So you got to finish it. You got to get through the whole thing.
That was a smart move, and I'm glad that they agitated you, and
yes.
I want to give out some kudos here, not because I made the film, but because they're well deserved, and I know you will echo that. Firstly, the brilliant editing by Blake. Is it Harges?
Yeah, Blake Harges. He's a close friend of mine, incredible editor.
Let's put a picture of him. He got an award, and you've got this, the black and white picture because you sent it to me. Here's the black and white picture. Jelly Film Festival finalist, and that's not a joke. There is a Jelly Film Festival, and I love the photo. It's in black and white. I love it. I mean, let's face it, he's a 20-year veteran of television and film. So you got the right guy there. Masterful job. And while we're talking about masterful, and I want everyone to be aware of this, but the good thing about a good soundtrack for me is one that you don't notice until you have to notice it, because it perpetuates the film and the storyline and everything. And Stephen Guttynes. Stephen Guttynes did a brilliant job. I mean, between the editing, the story, and then I'm just looking at my notes here. Who was the cinematographer?
I did all the cinematography. I wish I had a cinematographer, by the way.
The cinematography sucked. That's why I didn't put anything down on here about that. No, the cinematography, and I want to ask you about the cinematography. I was
a novice when I started, so forgive me, because over the 5 years I kind of evolved in my ability.
Listen, firstly, your drone work on this was amazing. I loved the drone camera work. Let me get a little bit nerdish here. I was impressed that you chose to shoot some scenes in 60 to 120 frames per second.
Sure.
I know that directors, and I'm putting you in good company here, directors Ang Lee and Peter Jackson are proponents of 120 frames per second. There's a whole debate about that because but anyway, it really does look smooth and epic in quality. But my concern was that it must have cost you a lot more money to do it in that many frames.
No, I think, luckily, fortunately, with the technology that we have now, I didn't shoot enough to make a financial difference. You understand what I'm saying? If I had done these, big, large shots, maybe, but we were fortunate that doing that didn't really impact us financially. The bigger challenges are just media management, and we didn't have a big crew, and we didn't have loads of editors, and on a feature film you have like a scripted movie, you have an editorial staff of 8 or 10 people or something, right? So it was first of all, and I got to give credit, Blake also did about half of the drone photography. So Blake is a wonderful drone operator and photographer as well, just extremely talented. I can't thank him enough for being on the project with me. We went to film school together. He's just extremely talented, and same to Steve. But yeah, I mean, the cinematography was, and I'll say this, it's easy to get good cinematography when what you're photographing is already very beautiful, right?
Yeah.
So that area is beautiful. It looks in a lot of the internet photos, it looks like this wasteland, but when you take a step back, it's very, very beautiful. You have these mountains, you have these sunsets, you have this glassy water that's giving you reflections. It looks a little dour when you see these buildings and things, but overall, if you go out there, it's quite stunning when you see it.
Yeah. Anne Smith just has made a comment, and thank you for this comment, Anne. I totally agree with you. I've got it on the screen. Now, our guest can't see what we can all see. He only sees it when he gets the video from me later on in the evening. And he will see this. The world, this is Anne, the world will be needing another David Attenborough. So a filmmaker with the passion for the environment that Greg seems to have would be an asset. So I definitely send a copy of this film to him. So yeah, I mean, I know you don't have people. Yes, you do. You have, we should mention, let's give some kudos here a minute, and this will be a good way for me to say that. So firstly, well, kudos in the sense that I want to make a general one here. You were very lucky, fortunate that the people who appear on camera in this film, and I'm saying this not only to you, but for the people that are chomping at the bit to watch it,
Sure.
The people who appear on camera in this film are charismatic, engaging, and passionate about telling their stories. And that is absolutely crucial to a good film. And
Yes.
And your friend, the mayor, or who was the mayor of the region,
Yes.
whose name has just eluded me, and I apologize.
Kerry Morrison.
Kerry, I'm so sorry, Kerry, if you're watching this. Kerry, I felt was a great building block for everyone else in this film. Kerry really was almost your narrator. I know you had a narrator, but Kerry was almost the narrator there. All of the people you had in the film were very strong, very passionate, and that comes through. And I started out by saying that this film, as I have already told you, is your love letter, and it oozes the love that you have. So collectively, you become a family, all embracing this whole area with oodles of love.
Yeah, and Kerry deserves a ton of credit because he has spearheaded so many things and he lived down there for quite a while at the Salton Sea, making the sacrifices to take the time, go to the meetings, bring people together. And he's really just deserves a ton of credit, as well also as a lot of other people in the film who have been involved with Salton Sea for quite a while.
Yes.
Linda Beale and of course Bruce Wilcox and just, I mean, there's all of those people have worked on it a very, very long time. So that passion comes through because they all want to see something done as badly as I did, right? And so it was very, like I said, it's easy to photograph something beautiful when it's already beautiful. It's easy to tell that passionate story when the subjects in the story are themselves very, very passionate.
That's
about
right.
this subject.
That's right. And
they all speak. They all wanted to speak. They didn't. It wasn't me twisting their arm and getting them on camera. When I called them, they said, "Yes, I want to tell you the story."
You could see that. You could see that, and I must commend you as well. I know this is an independent film, and we've been featuring independent films on this show for a while now during COVID, because this is your time. This is where people can end watching this show and then go and watch it wherever they are. Your lighting and camera work smacked of an expensive documentary. I mean, it was it really did. I mean, that's, you know, I said I'm a nerd. I look at everything. I didn't for 1 minute think that this was an independent documentary. This is a fully, you know, massive endeavor that you've taken on here. But you can't stop here. You have got to present this, and it's got to be shown wherever possible to get people motivated to do something about it. So what do you want? I'm going to wrap this up now, but I have to ask you the obvious question. I think I've shown you what I've taken away from this, but what do you want Miracle in the Desert, The Rise and Fall of the Salton Sea to accomplish, maybe in general or just with the audience who see it?
Two things. One is awareness of what's going on at the Salton Sea, awareness of the Salton Sea, period. A lot of people don't even know it exists. People in Southern California don't even know it exists. So awareness. And two, if possible, action. You know, action by people in this area that see it, and participating in the conversations at the state level, calling their representatives, things like that.
Yeah.
And if there's a last thing that's just a general theme, inspiring people to be more present and aware of their environment that they live in. You know, we're all living on this planet together. We only have one. It can heal itself, but not as quickly as we would like. And we need to be careful with what we do with it moving forward. We've gone through this rapid economic expansion in the last 60, 70 years, and we're seeing the effects of that. And we need to cumulatively adjust our behavior. So if that inspires people in a small way to be more mindful, you don't have to stop eating meat tomorrow and stop using plastic tomorrow. You don't need to do those extreme things, but even just being more present and mindful about your actions in regards to the environment, that would be, you know, great to see.
Perfect. I just want to tell everyone that my guest has been Greg Bassenian, who has written, directed, filmed, droned, everything. I'm the one who drones on and on, but he droned with a camera. The award-winning documentary Miracle in the Desert, The Rise and Fall of the Salton Sea, which you can watch. I'm sure my friend Lloyd has long gone to bed with his cup of cocoa because it's so late in London. But you can watch it, folks, on iTunes and Google Play, and you can rent on demand on platforms including Amazon Prime Video, Vudu. Lou Brockman. Hello, Lou. Thank you. Let me go back. Amazon Prime Video, Vudu, YouTube, Microsoft, and Vimeo. You can also buy the film on DVD or Blu-ray at Amazon. Do you know if your film is available outside of the United States?
Good point, because I wanted to bring that up. It will be. So it is being released on demand internationally in about 3 weeks. So it will be available internationally in English-speaking territories, amongst other places. So UK and other places, I believe starting in December. I need to get the exact date, but the answer is yes. It will be on iTunes and Google Play internationally in December.
Okay, well, people, to find out about this, to be updated by Greg, the website, for those of you who are watching the show, has been on the screen the entire time under my guest. But the website, and again, for those of you who are listening to us on TuneIn Radio, and anywhere for that matter, don't forget that if you go to the silverstonecollection.com, I have a page every week featuring my guest with photographs that we have shown and links on there. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, then you have the links below here. So anyway, the website is very simple, miracleinthedesert.com. You go there, you can get updated on when it's going to be released nationally. Don't forget, Greg, put it on there so people will know. Facebook at Miracle in the Desert, and on Instagram, Miracle in the Desert. All you got to remember is Miracle in the Desert. Greg, I wish you a happy 4-month anniversary on Tuesday, I think it is, if my calendar's correct.
Thank you.
My best wishes to your beautiful bride. She's absolutely gorgeous. And I thank you for being on the show. You've been a fabulous, engaging guest.
Oh, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching the film. You know,
I'm going to watch it again. I told you.
Good.
I'm going to watch it at least 4 times. Ladies and gentlemen, I love you all. Mwah.